Learn how rich people think. Now, why is this important? Well, consider this quote. Money may not be everything, but it ranks right up there with oxygen. Now, we all know that the human body needs many things to survive, but it's hard to argue that oxygen is the most important factor. And in our lives, we need many things to function, such as health, relationships, success, all the things that we're going to be talking about on this channel. But I want you to look at money the same way that you look at oxygen. It is basically a source of fuel, and without it, we cannot survive, much less thrive. Speaking of surviving versus thriving, have you ever wondered why some of the smartest people are perhaps the poorest people, while some of the people with average intelligence creating fortunes? Well, that is why I wanted to create this video to show you how the wealth create their fortunes by the way they think about money. And to do this, I've laid out a 3-part blueprint from Steve Siebold's excellent book, How Rich People Think. It's a book where Steve has gathered lessons over 26 years and interviewed some of the most wealthiest people on the planet. And I'll be sure to drop a link in the description below. Well, welcome. My name is Brad, and on this channel, I like to create blueprints to show us how we can win at life. And we all know that so much of winning comes from the way we think about everything. And the reason I like to emphasize the way that we think about things is because it was one of the core shifts of my mindset that's helped me to go from fat to fit, demoralized to doctor. So let's start things out with what I call the transition mind map. It's how you can go from the poverty mindset to the rich mindset. And let's briefly go over the overview. It's based on 3 main points. Point number 1 is the force versus catalyst. Point number 2 is knowing the purpose of money. And point number 3 is called world-class consciousness. So what do these points mean? Well, great question. Stick around and we're going to unpack them as we go through this video. Okay, so point number 1, force versus catalyst. We're going to break this down into 3 areas: the moral superiority, personal revelation, and personal responsibility. So what we need to understand first about this moral superiority is that money is not a catalyst for corruption. In fact, it is a force for good. You see, the poverty mindset thinks that rich people are only uncaring, corrupt, or evil tyrants. Now, as we all know, what we think about is so important because our thoughts lead to our actions, and our actions help us to attract what we want in life. So this level of poverty thinking is always going to lead to struggle because it pushes money away instead of attracting it. And this is huge because it leads to our further understanding of the next point, which is personal revelation. And in personal revelation, the rich mindset knows that money is not what corrupts people. People are already corrupt or uncaring. Money just reveals that character. But to the contrary, if you're already a person with a championship character, the money's going to amplify the good that we talked about, being a force for good, and it's just going to make you and everyone else around you better. So I like the way Siebold puts it in his book, and I'll paraphrase what he says. Getting rich liberates and reveals the person's true self. So in summary, it's not the money, it's the person, which leads to the next point on personal responsibility. So to separate the poverty mindset from the rich mindset, the level of personal responsibility looks like this. The poverty mindset loves to blame money because it psychologically takes them off the hook to actually have to work and come up with creative ways to make money. On the other hand, the wealthy mindset takes the responsibility because they know that money creates the freedom, the power, and the opportunity to not only help themselves, but to help everyone around them. So instead of struggling for money, the rich mindset becomes a money-making machine. All right, so now to go back to the transitional mind map, see where we are. We are now on point number 2, and that is understanding the purpose of money. Now, this point on the purpose of money is going to be brief, but it is going to be extremely powerful. So to better understand this process of the purpose of money, let's look at 3 different groups of people. You have the lower class, the middle class, and the world class. The lower class simply works in order to pay the bills. The middle class works in order to pay the bills on time to ensure they have a good credit in order to keep spending more money than they earn. And then the world class makes money in order to make more money. Let me explain. So the way they do this, instead of buying things that they can't afford or spending more money than they earn, they buy and invest in assets, and these assets continue to produce more and more income as they sleep. So what is the main ingredient that separates these 3 classes and the way that they think? Now, before we find out, I would love it if you would hit that like button and subscribe, as it will motivate me to continue putting out quality content like this in the future. Okay, so going back to our transitional mind map, point number 3, and that is world-class consciousness. Now let's start out by looking at this level of consciousness with 2 quick points and 1 key takeaway. The poverty mindset is simply based on fear and security. Their overall goal is only to survive. The rich mindset is based on love and abundance, which helps them to have an overall goal to manifest their dreams and everyone around them. All right, and so here's the key takeaway. Now, if there's one thing and one thing only that you remember from this video, remember this one key takeaway. The rich mindset is based on your level of consciousness, and this will determine whether you think you deserve to be rich or if you will settle to be poor. So instead of merely surviving or settling, the world class actually believes it is their right to be rich, to be fulfilled, to have joy. So now let's look at a couple of examples and go inside the consciousness of what it means to have the rich mindset versus the poor mindset. So what really helps to understand this are the questions that go on in the mind of these 2 different levels of consciousness. So the poverty mindset says, who am I to be rich? Where the rich mindset says, why not me? The poverty mindset has a false level of humility that says, who am I to have money, joy, abundance? I'm simply here to take up space and pay the bills. But the rich, on the other hand, they see other people being wealthy, having success, living in abundance, and they say, hey, I can do that too. And here's another key fundamental within these 2 mindsets. The poverty mindset focuses only on their problems, and so they stay poor. The rich, on the other hand, focuses on other people's problems, develops a solution, and then makes money in return. And to go one step farther, let's really understand the psychology between these 2 mindsets by looking at Maslow's hierarchy. So now if we look at the bottom level of this pyramid, you can see how it's all based on survival. This is where the poverty mindset stays. In essence, they're somewhat selfish because they're only thinking of their own needs and only thinking of how to survive. The rich, on the other hand, focuses on self-actualization, where they progress up the level of the hierarchy by becoming the best versions of themselves. And they do this because they know the best version of themselves leads to a transcendence. And this level of transcendence will then help other people live an abundant life because they add value to them along the way. So now here's a question to summarize this concept. If you are helping solve other people's problems, why not be compensated? It's a win-win situation. And everything boils down to this one phrase: self-fulfilling prophecy. Rich thinking leads to rich behaviors. Poverty thinking leads to poverty behaviors. And the results take care of themselves. So if you like this video, be sure to click up in the corner where we discuss another topic on how you can develop the rich mindset.